Ask a locomotive engineer with 20 years on the property whether you should follow him into the cab. He will not hesitate. He will tell you no. A generation ago, this was a career people waited years to reach. Seniority lists ran deep. The pay was strong. The work carried weight. Today, the railroads cannot fill the seat, and the men and women who once fought to earn it are warning the next generation to walk away. Number 11 is the reason most engineers never talk about their work at the dinner table. Number 5 forced the United States Congress to pass a law about sleep, and it still was not enough. And number 9 is so ordinary, so basic, that the fact it remains unsolved tells you everything about how these companies see the people running their trains. Here are 18 reasons why nobody wants to be a locomotive engineer anymore. Number 18. The pay no longer matches what the job takes from you. Locomotive engineers at major American railroads typically earn somewhere between $80,000 and $120,000 a year, depending on seniority and territory. On paper, that is solid money. Set it next to what the job actually demands, and the picture changes. No guaranteed weekends, no fixed holidays. Stretches of 3, 4, 5 days away from home with less than 2 hours of warning. A heavy equipment operator running a crane on a pipeline project can match that salary and sleep in his own bed every night. A long-haul trucker with a decade of experience can clear comparable wages and still choose when to pull over. The railroads have not raised total compensation fast enough to compete with trades that offer real money and an actual life outside of work. Younger workers are doing the arithmetic. The arithmetic does not favor the railroad. Number 17. There is no schedule. Most freight locomotive engineers work on what the industry calls the extra board. You do not have assigned days off. You do not know when your next trip starts. You sit at home, bag packed, waiting for the phone to ring, and when it does, you have roughly 90 minutes to report. That call can come at 2 in the afternoon or 2 in the morning. It can come on Christmas. It can come 6 hours after you walk through the door from your last run. Engineers describe it as being on a leash that never comes off. You cannot commit to a dinner, a birthday party, a medical appointment, because you genuinely do not know whether you will be in town or 300 miles away on a grain train bound for the Gulf Coast. The unpredictability is not a scheduling inconvenience. It is the architecture of the job itself. Number 16. You vanish from your own life. A road freight engineer can be gone for 2 or 3 days at a stretch, sometimes longer when the railroad is short on crews at the away terminal. You leave home, run your train to the far end of your territory, wait in a railroad-supplied bunkhouse for a return trip, and come back whenever they decide to call you. Your partner handles the house, the children, the bills, the emergencies alone. You miss the things that hold a family together, and you miss them not once, but repeatedly, predictably, for years. Divorce rates among railroad operating crews have been stubbornly high for decades, and most engineers will tell you the schedule is the reason. Not the danger. Not the pay disputes. Not the corporate politics. The plain fact that you are not present for the life you are supposedly working to support. Your daughter's first school play. Your father's last trip to the hospital. Your own wedding anniversary. The railroad does not weigh any of it against the need to move freight. The train is called. You go. Pause for 1 second. Number 15. The trains keep getting longer. In the 1990s, a typical Class 1 freight train might run 70 or 80 cars. Today, trains of 150 cars stretching close to 3 miles are routine on some corridors. Longer trains are harder to handle in every measurable way. They bunch and stretch through curves, generating enormous buff and draft forces that can snap couplers or shove cars off the rail. They take far longer to stop. Much longer. A 3-mile train descending a mountain grade with mixed loads behaves in ways that shorter trains simply do not, and the physics scale in directions that make the engineer's job measurably more dangerous with every additional car. The railroads push train length because fewer, longer trains mean fewer crews, fewer locomotives, and lower operating ratios. The engineer in the cab absorbs the operational risk of that business decision without additional compensation or any meaningful reduction in accountability when the forces exceed what the equipment can handle. Number 14. The infrastructure is aging faster than the railroads are willing to fix it. Class 1. Railroads in the United States collectively deferred billions in maintenance spending over the past decade, while posting record operating ratios for their shareholders. Engineers see the consequences every shift. Slow orders pile up on subdivisions that used to be mainline racetrack. Bridges built before the Second World War carry unit trains that weigh twice what the original engineers ever imagined. Ties rot. Rail develops surface defects that go unflagged for months. Signal systems run on relay logic designed in the middle of the 20th century, and replacement parts come from a shrinking pool of suppliers who still manufacture for that era. None of this is secret. Every locomotive engineer who runs a territory regularly knows which curves have bad rail, which bridges shudder under a loaded train, which signals stick on red for reasons nobody has fully diagnosed. They file reports, they call dispatchers, they fill out the paperwork, and they watch nothing change, quarter after quarter, because the capital went to stock buybacks instead of ties and ballast. The anxiety is cumulative. A new engineer might not notice. A veteran who has been running the same subdivision for 15 years knows exactly what has deteriorated and how fast. Some of them describe it as a slow-motion countdown. They are not waiting for a catastrophe. They are waiting to see if the catastrophe happens on their train, on their shift, under their name. That is not a risk most people are willing to carry for a paycheck, no matter how large. Pause for 1 second. Number 13. The attendance policy punishes you for having a life. In 2022, BNSF Railway introduced an attendance system called High-Vis. Under that system, engineers and conductors receive a pool of points. Every time you are unavailable when the railroad calls, you lose points. Take a day off because your child is in the emergency room, you lose points. Miss a call because you had a medical appointment you booked 2 months ago, you lose points. Run out of points and you face discipline up to and including termination. The system does not distinguish between an emergency and a personal preference. It treats every moment of human need as an operational failure. Other Class 1 railroads implemented similar frameworks under different names. The message from all of them is consistent. The railroad owns your time, all of it, and any moment you spend on your own life is a mark against you. Pause for 1 second. Number 12. Fail one drug test, and your career is over. Federal Railroad Administration regulations require random drug and alcohol testing for all safety-sensitive employees. A locomotive engineer can be pulled for a test at any point, before a trip, after a trip, or during one. A single positive result triggers immediate removal from service, a mandatory substance abuse evaluation, and a return to duty process that can take months. A second positive result effectively ends a railroad career. Nobody argues the principle. No reasonable person wants an impaired operator at the controls of a machine weighing tens of thousands of tons moving through populated areas. But the zero-tolerance framework, combined with the erratic schedule and chronic sleep disruption, creates a background pressure that compounds every other stress on this list. You are exhausted, isolated, working irregular hours in a job that offers no flexibility, and one mistake at the wrong moment erases everything you have spent years building. Number 11. You will hit someone, and there is nothing you can do about it. A loaded freight train moving at 50 miles per hour takes over a mile to stop. When a vehicle stalls on a grade crossing, when a person steps onto the tracks, the engineer sees it happening and is powerless to prevent it. Every veteran locomotive engineer in North America has either struck a vehicle, struck a person, or lives with the certainty that it is a matter of when, not if. The railroads provide some counseling after a strike. Some offer a few days of administrative leave. Then you go back to work, back into the same cab, past the same crossings. The psychological weight of that experience is enormous and cumulative. Engineers carry 2, 3, 5 fatalities over a career. They describe a specific dread that settles in permanently. The moment you see something on the tracks and reach for the horn, knowing full well it will not matter. No salary compensates for carrying that. The industry records it on a spreadsheet and moves on. The engineer carries it home in his chest. What separates the locomotive engineer shortage from other labor shortages across the economy is that money alone cannot solve it. The railroads could raise wages substantially tomorrow, and the core problem would remain. The job itself has become structurally hostile to a normal human life. Every reason on this list connects to the same root cause. The North American freight railroad industry spent the past 2 decades stripping out every buffer, every margin, every accommodation that once made the work sustainable. Crew sizes shrank. Rest facilities deteriorated. Schedules became less predictable, not more. Management systems grew more punitive. The trains got longer and heavier while the workforce got smaller and more exhausted. The railroads did all of this deliberately because the financial markets rewarded every cut. Every dollar not spent on crew welfare, on adequate rest facilities, on scheduling flexibility, dropped straight to the operating ratio. And the operating ratio is the single number that moves the stock price on an earnings call. The engineers are not walking away because they cannot handle hard work. They are walking away because the work has been deliberately made harder for the benefit of shareholders who will never sit in the cab. Number 10. Every input you make in the cab is now recorded. Positive Train Control, known as PTC, is a federally mandated safety system that monitors speed, signal compliance, and braking authority in real time. If the engineer exceeds a speed restriction or fails to acknowledge a signal, PTC intervenes and stops the train automatically. The safety case for the system is strong. It has prevented collisions and overspeed derailments. But for the person at the controls, PTC transformed the locomotive cab into a monitored workspace where every throttle movement is logged, every brake application is time-stamped, and the system can override you without warning. Combine that with the inward-facing cameras now mounted in many locomotive cabs, recording the engineer throughout the entire trip, and you have a job that transformed, within a single decade, from one of the last truly autonomous blue-collar roles in America to one of the most comprehensively surveilled. The old-timers remember when the cab was yours. That version of the job no longer exists. Number 9. There is no bathroom. Most freight locomotives in North America do not have a toilet. An engineer on a 12-hour tour of duty, which can stretch to 14 under-hours of service extensions, has no restroom facility on the locomotive. The available options are a bucket, a bottle, or waiting until the train reaches a terminal or a siding near a facility. For female locomotive engineers, the situation is considerably worse. The railroads have been aware of this for decades. Unions have raised it in every round of national bargaining. Some newer locomotive models include a small sanitary compartment behind the cab, but the majority of the active fleet does not. It is a problem so elemental, so fundamentally basic, that its persistence after all these years reveals more about the industry's regard for the human beings in the cab than any corporate mission statement ever could. Any office worker in America would refuse to sit at a desk for 12 hours without access to a restroom. Locomotive engineers do it as a matter of routine, and the railroads treat it as an acceptable condition of employment. Number 8. Sit in that seat long enough, and your body starts to break down. A locomotive engineer spends 8 to 12 hours at a stretch in a high-vibration environment, sometimes longer. The diesel prime mover transmits constant low-frequency vibration through the locomotive frame, through the cab floor, and up through the seat directly into the spine. Over years, this produces cumulative damage that no amount of cushioning fully prevents. Occupational health researchers have studied whole-body vibration exposure in locomotive cabs for decades. The findings are consistent across studies. Engineers show elevated rates of chronic lower back pain, degenerative disc disease, and spinal compression injuries compared to the general population. The damage does not come from a single rough ride. It comes from thousands of hours of sub-threshold vibration that slowly degrades cartilage, disc material, and soft tissue in ways the body cannot repair. Then there is the noise. Even in a modern diesel-electric locomotive, sustained cab noise levels during full throttle operation run around 85 to 90 decibels. That is the threshold where hearing damage begins with prolonged exposure. Older locomotive models are louder. Engineers who spent their early years in the cab before hearing protection became standard carry permanent high-frequency hearing loss that no treatment can reverse. Add the sedentary posture, the irregular meals eaten from a cooler bag, and the chronically disrupted sleep, and the result is a job that systematically degrades the human body over a 20-year career. Retired engineers describe a constellation of damage that sounds almost uniform: bad back, bad knees, diminished hearing, chronic fatigue. These are not individual failings. They are the predictable output of the working conditions. The locomotive seat is better than it was in the steam era. It is still not adequate for what the job demands. Most engineers over 50 will tell you their body aged faster than they did. The body keeps a ledger. The railroad never opens. Number 7. The training pipeline is long, demanding, and offers no guarantee. Becoming a qualified locomotive engineer takes roughly 12 to 18 months from your date of hire. You start as a conductor trainee, learning the operating rules, the air brake systems, the signal indications, and the physical territory mile by mile. After qualifying as a conductor, you bid for engineer training, months of classroom instruction, simulator sessions, and supervised trips with a veteran engineer watching every decision you make. Wash out at any stage and you start over, or you are released from service entirely. The completion rate is not generous. For someone weighing this against an electrician apprenticeship or a commercial driving program that puts you behind the wheel earning wages in a matter of weeks, the railroad's timeline looks punishing. You invest over a year of your life learning a profession before you truly understand what the daily reality costs, and by the time you find out, you have already left whatever career path you might have taken instead. The railroad bets on sunk cost to keep you. For the current generation of workers, that bet is losing. Pause 1 second. Number 6. When something goes wrong, the investigation starts with you. A derailment, a crossing collision, a signal overrun. The Federal Railroad Administration, the National Transportation Safety Board, and the railroad's own internal review board all converge on the person at the controls before looking anywhere else. Even when the root cause turns out to be a track defect, a mechanical failure, or a dispatcher error, the engineer's actions are examined first and scrutinized most aggressively. If any procedural deviation is found, however minor and however unrelated to the incident, the engineer faces formal discipline. The legal exposure compounds it. Engineers involved in fatal accidents can face criminal charges, as prosecutors pursued after high-profile derailments in recent years. The message is unmistakable. You bear personal and potentially criminal responsibility for everything that happens to this train, but you control almost none of the upstream conditions that create the failures. Not the track maintenance budget, not the dispatcher's workload, not the mechanical condition of the locomotive you were handed at the terminal. Number 5. Sleep deprivation is not a side effect of the job. It is embedded in the structure. Under the Federal Hours of Service Act, a locomotive engineer can work up to 12 consecutive hours. After that, the railroad must provide a minimum of 10 hours of undisturbed rest before calling the engineer again. On paper, 10 hours sounds adequate. In practice, it is a fiction. The 10-hour rest period includes travel time to and from the lodging facility. It includes time spent trying to fall asleep in a bunkhouse shared with strangers on opposite schedules, in a room where the walls are thin and the climate control sounds like a small engine running. It includes the time your body spends fighting the impossibility of sleeping at noon when it last slept at midnight. Subtract travel, meals, and the basic inability to fall asleep on command in a strange room, and many engineers get 5 or 6 hours of actual rest before the next call comes. Congress recognized the severity of the problem in 2008 when it passed the Rail Safety Improvement Act and mandated revisions to the hours of service regulations. The Federal Railroad Administration introduced additional rest requirements and fatigue management plans. But the fundamental structure did not change. You work when the railroad calls, you rest when the railroad permits, and your circadian rhythm is not a factor in the equation. Fatigue-related incidents on American railroads have not disappeared. They continue to surface in National Transportation Safety Board investigation reports with grim regularity. The engineers know they are tired. The railroads know the engineers are tired. The regulators know everyone is tired. The system continues to operate on the polite assumption that 10 hours in a bunkhouse equals 10 hours of sleep. Anyone who has tried to rest in one knows what that assumption is worth. You are piloting a machine that weighs tens of thousands of tons through populated areas at speed, and you are doing it on broken sleep. That is not a complaint. That is the job description. Pause for 1 second. Number 4. Low seniority sends you to places nobody would choose to live. Railroad crew bases are located where the railroad needs them, not where people want to be. A new engineer with bottom seniority can expect assignment to a terminal in a small town hours from any city, chosen for its proximity to a junction point or a classification yard, not for any quality of life it offers. Housing options near these terminals tend to be limited. Medical care often requires a long drive. Schools are sparse. A partner with a career of their own faces the choice of finding remote work or surrendering their profession entirely. Senior engineers with enough standing to hold a desirable terminal protect those assignments with everything they have. A new hire may spend years at the bottom of the board in a town that feels like professional exile, far from family and everything familiar, before accumulating enough seniority to bid into a terminal where someone might actually choose to build a life. Number 3. The old brotherhood is gone. Railroad work once carried a specific kind of identity. Engineers, conductors, and brakemen belonged to a culture with its own vocabulary, its own traditions, its own sense of mutual endurance. Families put 3 and 4 generations on the same railroad. The work meant something beyond the paycheck, and the bonds between operating crews were forged in shared hardship that outsiders could not fully understand. That culture has eroded steadily over the past 2 decades. The workforce reductions, the constant corporate restructuring, the adversarial management posture, the attendance systems designed to treat employees as interchangeable scheduling units, all of it hollowed out. The thing that once made the sacrifice feel bearable. The veterans who joined expecting to be part of something found that the something had been replaced by a cost center. The new hires never experienced the old culture. The old hands grieve it openly. And nobody, not the unions, not the companies, not the regulators, is building anything to take its place. Number 2. Automation is visible on the horizon. The technology to operate a freight train without a human in the cab already exists in prototype form. Positive Train Control demonstrated that a computer can monitor speed and enforce signal compliance more consistently than a fatigued human at 3 in the morning. Autonomous vehicle technology developed for long-haul trucking is being adapted for rail applications. Several Class 1 railroads have tested remote-controlled locomotive operations in yard environments for years. Full automation of mainline revenue freight is not imminent, but the trajectory is plain, and everyone in the cab can see where it leads. For a young person considering a career that requires over a year of training, years of seniority building, and a complete surrender of personal autonomy, the possibility that the job may not exist in its current form within 15 years does not encourage commitment. The railroads insist publicly that they will always need a qualified person at the controls. The engineers have watched enough corporate promises dissolve to know exactly what that assurance is worth. Number 1. The workers themselves are telling you not to come. Spend 10 minutes in any online space where railroad operating employees gather, any forum, any subreddit, any private crew group, and the advice to anyone considering the profession is almost perfectly unanimous. Do not do this. Find something else. The money is not worth what it takes from you. This is not a handful of disgruntled employees venting after a bad trip. It is the settled, repeated, consistent message of an entire craft. Engineers with 20 and 30 years on the property, people who built their whole identities around this work, who once felt genuine pride climbing into a locomotive at 4 in the morning, are actively warning their own children to choose a different path. That is the verdict that no signing bonus or recruitment campaign can overcome. Not a government workforce study, not a Surface Transportation Board hearing, not a union press release. The people who do this job, who know its rhythms and costs better than any analyst or executive, are looking at the next generation and saying one thing clearly: this is no longer a life worth choosing. When the workforce itself becomes the loudest voice against recruitment, the problem is no longer about compensation or benefits or scheduling. It is about what the job has become. And until that changes, the cabs will keep getting harder to fill. The locomotive still moves. The freight still crosses the continent. Somewhere tonight, an engineer sits in a dark cab on a siding outside a town whose name he barely remembers, waiting for a signal, running on broken sleep, 200 miles from home. The train behind him stretches past the curve and out of sight. He would not recommend this job to anyone he cares about. The railroad does not need his recommendation. It just needs him to answer the phone one more time.